Hi, my name is Iris. I hope that you are doing very well. If you are new here, welcome. This channel is all about faith-based content. So, before I begin, I would like to take a minute and just appreciate where I'm at, it's such a beautiful sunny day, I love how the sun just hits the grass, there's different shades of green. It's just beautiful out here. I hope that it's a really nice day too, wherever you are at. So today I am going to be talking about overcoming the fear of the dark, right? And I've struggled. Before I get into that, I wanted to focus on two verses. And the first one is in Psalm 34:4. And it says, I sought the Lord and he heard me and delivered me from all my fears. And the second one is in Matthew chapter 19, verse 26. And it says, Jesus looked at them and said, with man, this is impossible, but with God, all things are possible. So I grew up with the fear of, if I can be honest, there has been a lot of fear in my life, in different areas, but specifically for this video, I'm going to be focusing on the fear of the dark, or fear of sleeping in the dark. And I've dragged that, carried that with me for so many years. And in my family, we're pretty big, right? So I would never sleep alone. I would always be sleeping with one of my sisters, or even my mom. I would also be, sharing a bed. I would be sharing a bedroom. And the majority of the time, I wasn't afraid or I wasn't scared to sleep with the light off if I was sleeping with somebody next to me. And that was the only way that I could sleep with the light off. So overall, it was three fears. I was, one, afraid to sleep by myself in my own bed, even though somebody else was on the other side of the same room in a different bed. One. Two, I was scared to sleep with the light off. And three, I was scared to sleep alone in my room by myself, with nobody else there. So in total, there was three fears in total. And I remember that I've carried that for so many years. I'm 29 years old. This year I'm gonna be 30. I hope that you can hear with all the cars passing, that noise, So I basically overcame this fear last year, but it took me so many years. And I felt really ashamed, because I'm man, I'm a grown woman, there's kids out there that can sleep on their own. There's adults out there that can sleep on their own, by themselves, with the light off and stuff like that. I think I've only met just one girl who could, she could sleep by herself in her own room, in her own bed and stuff like that. But she just has to have the light on. And for me, it's what I just said earlier, it cost a lot of shame, because I was man, I shouldn't be, afraid of sleeping by myself. I shouldn't be afraid of sleeping in the dark. this shouldn't even be a fear, right? Especially because I'm a grown woman. And then I would think, what example am I going to be giving, or what example am I to a little kid, when my cousins would come up to me and they'd be Iris, but I'm scared. Iris, but I'm scared to sleep by myself. I'm scared to sleep without the light on, And that I'd be you don't have to be scared, but within me, I'm man, I'm telling him he doesn't have to be scared, but I'm over here terrified, to sleep by myself. So I remember I went before the Lord and I would tell him, I'm God, I don't want to be afraid of the dark anymore. I don't want to be afraid of sleeping by myself. This is embarrassing. I shouldn't even have to be dealing or going through this, right? And the reason that I was focusing or talking about the first verse is because it says that I sought the Lord and he heard me and delivered me from all my fears. And when I think about it, this is one fear that I had, right? But in general, I know that maybe you might not have the same fear, but we all have different kinds of fears, right? And I know that you don't want to continue living your life being surrounded by fear, right? Because I know that I didn't want to. I wanted to overcome this fear. And exactly like how it says right here in this verse that God delivered me from all my fears. Like, that means basically every single one of them, right? Not just one. And I believe that this is David, because it's saying, I sought the Lord, you know? So the same way I did, I went before God and I'm like, God, this is the fear that I have, you know? These are the fears that I have. Like, I don't want to continue like living in fear, you know? Because the word also tells us that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, of love, and of a sound mind, right? And in that same verse, it says, and delivered me from all my fears, right? So what does this tell us? That God wants us to be fearless, that God does not want us to be living in constant fear, you know? And on top of that, like, God does not want you to like be beating yourself up, or he doesn't want you to feel ashamed or be condemned, you know, just because you're just because of the fears that you may have, right? Or the fears that you're dealing with. And the second thing is that the second verse that I read earlier, it says, with man this is impossible, but with God all things are possible. So honestly speaking, I literally thought it was impossible to sleep on my own, like to be sleeping on my own bed. I thought it was impossible to get to the point where I was going to be able to sleep with the light off, right? And I believe that God was also preparing me, to overcome this fear, because I remember that there was this time where I had to share a room with one of my sisters, and she is very, I don't know what the right word is. I think it's very particular. She just doesn't like nobody to be on her bed, right? So during that time, I was sharing a room with her, and I was terrified to sleep by myself in my own bed. And, I wanted to run to her and say, hey, like, let me sleep with you on your bed, But then I had to push myself, and I had to fight, like, no, Iris, just keep playing on the bed, like, it's okay, you're gonna be fine. And I think during that time, I was also, what verse was I saying? It goes something down the lines of, he lays me lie down in green pastures, something like that. Yeah, something like that, one of those verses. And I remember I would like fight, and I would be like, oh my gosh, like within me, like, you can't even go over there because she's gonna tell you no. So, or maybe there would have been like, there was gonna be like a time where she'd be like, yeah, Iris, go ahead. But I was like, I was older than her, and I was like, man, this is embarrassing, to be telling her like, hey, I'm afraid of the dark, or hey, I'm afraid to sleep by myself, in my own bed, so let me sleep with you. So I like pushed myself to continue staying on my bed regardless, right? Even though I was afraid. And the same thing, or in the same way, like eventually I began to desire, to have my own room, to be able to sleep on my own. And then my sister decided to, move out into a different room. So then I had a bedroom all to myself, right? And still I was terrified. I was terrified to sleep by myself. And I was constantly sleeping with the light on. But eventually, I got to the point where I could turn off the light. I could sleep by myself without any light and stuff like that. And I got to overcome that fear. So one of the key things that I want you to take from this is that the fear, whatever it is that you are facing, there's nothing too small or there's nothing too big, like we all have different types of fears, and there's nothing to be ashamed of, or there's nothing to be, there's no reason for you to beat yourself up for, for having those type of fears. All you got to do is just take it to God. And it may take a couple of years, it may take a week, it might take months. I don't know how long it's going to take, but you're not going to remain the same. God's not going to leave you the same. You're going to be able to overcome whatever it is that you are dealing with. And I'm focusing just on fears, right? But it could also be something else. And the other thing, that as I was preparing this word, I began to think like, wow, like I used to think that this was something impossible for me to do, right? But literally with God, there's nothing impossible, you know? Like, you may think like, oh, this is too big. How am I going to overcome this? Because I literally thought that this was something impossible. Like literally like impossible, like one day seeing flying cars, you know, like that. But I thank God because I was able to overcome this. And the other thing is that whatever, you have to remind yourself or remember of what God has already done in your life. Like, don't take it lightly, you know, because as I was preparing this, I was like, okay, yeah, I used to have that fear, but now I don't have it anymore. Like, okay, that's great, you know. But I'm like, no, like, I got to take into consideration, like, how it affected my life before, you know, like, I didn't sleep well. Like, I was ashamed of this. Like, I would beat myself up for this, you know, like, but now I don't, you know. So that's something big that God has done in my life. And just like, in a way, it's like, don't minimize what God has already done. Don't minimize the miracles that God has already done in your life. Like, you have to continue seeing God as the God of the impossible, you know. And the other thing is, like, I decided to come out here and record, right, which is something really scary. Honestly speaking, there was like a couple of people that were walking by. I was like staring at them, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, I don't want them to stare at me. I don't want them to look at me. But I decided to come out here, you know, and like face another fear, you know, which is like actually recording myself out here, you know, in front of other people, in front of whoever's going to be watching, or not just that, but also listening, you know. So there's another fear that I can, you know, check off the list. But yeah, like, take whatever it is that you're dealing with, take whatever it is that you are going through to God. You know, He's the only one that's truly gonna help you. He's the only one that's going to deliver you. And He's not gonna deliver you from one thing, He's gonna deliver you from many things, you know. So thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.